Shalom, I'm Rabbi Jonathan, and today I'm reading from Numbers chapters 23 through 25. I'm reading from the TOV, Tree of Life version of the Bible. Then Balaam said to Balak, "Build me 7 altars here, and prepare for me here 7 bulls and 7 rams." So Balak did just as Balaam had said. Balak and Balaam offered a bull and a ram on each altar. Balaam said to Balak, "Stay here beside your offering. I will go, and perhaps Adonai will meet me. Whatever message he shows me, I will tell you." Then he went to a barren height. God met with Balaam and said to him, "I have prepared 7 altars, and on each altar I offered a bull and a ram." Adonai put a message into Balaam's mouth and said, "Return to Balak and speak this." Balaam went back to him. Behold, he was standing beside his offering with all the princes of Moab. Then he uttered his oracle and said, "From Aram Balak brought me, Moab's king from the mountains of the east. Come, curse Jacob for me. Come, denounce Israel. How can I curse one whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce one whom Adonai has not denounced? From the rocky peaks I see him. From the heights I behold him. Look, he lives as a nation apart, and does not consider himself as being like the other nations. Who can count Jacob's dust? Who can number 1/4 of Israel? Let my soul die the death of the upright, and let my end be like his." Balak said to Balaam, "What have you done to me? I brought you to curse my enemies, but look, you've actually blessed them." But in response he said, "Mustn't I speak whatever Adonai puts into my mouth?" Then Balak said to him, "Come now with me to another place, where you can see a part of them only, not all of them. Curse them for me from there." He took him to Lookout Field, on top of Pisgah. He built 7 altars, and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. "Stay here beside your offering," he said to Balak, "while I am meeting over there." Adonai met Balaam there, and put a message into his mouth, and said, "Return to Balak, and speak thus." So he went to him, and behold, he and the princes of Moab were standing beside his offering. Balak asked him, "What did Adonai say?" So he uttered his oracle and said, "Rise, Balak, hear me, son of Zippor. God is not a man who lies, or a son of man who changes his mind. Does he speak and then not do it, or promise and not fulfill it? Look, I received a command to bless. He has blessed. I cannot change it. No misfortune is to be seen in Jacob, and no misery in Israel. Adonai their God is with them. The king's shout is among them. God is bringing them from Egypt with the strong horns of the wild ox. There is no sorcery effective against Jacob, nor any divination against Israel. Now it will be said of Jacob and Israel, 'See what God has done.' The people rise like a lioness, like a lion who does not rest, until he eats his prey and drinks his victim's blood." Then Balak said to Balaam, "Do not curse them or bless them at all." Balaam answered and said to Balak, "Haven't I told you all that Adonai says I must do?" Balak said to Balaam, "Come with me to another place. Perhaps it will be pleasing to God, and you may curse them for me from there." So Balak took Balaam to the top of Peor, overlooking the wasteland. Balaam said to Balak, "Build me 7 altars here, and prepare 7 bulls and 7 rams for me." Balak did just as Balaam said, and offered a bull and a ram on each altar. When Balaam realized that it was pleasing in the eyes of Adonai to bless Israel, he did not resort to sorceries as at the other times, but turned his face toward the wilderness, lifting up his eyes. Balaam saw Israel dwelling by tribes. The Ruach Elohim came over him. He uttered his oracle and said, "This is the oracle of Balaam son of Beor, and the oracle of a strong man whose eye has been opened, the oracle of one hearing God's speech, one seeing Shaddai's vision, one fallen down, yet with open eyes. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, and your dwellings, O Israel! Like valleys they are spread out, like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by Adonai, like cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from his buckets, his seed by abundant water. His king will be greater than Agag. His kingdom will be exalted. God is bringing him out of Egypt. He is like the strong horns of a wild ox. He devours nations hostile to him. He will crush their bones. His arrows will pierce them. He crouches like a lion or a lioness. Who would rouse him? He who blesses you will be blessed, and he who curses you will be cursed. Then Balak became furious at Balaam and struck his hands together. Balak said to Balaam, I summoned you to curse my enemies, but look, you have blessed them these 3 times. Now go home. I said I would reward you, but see, Adonai has kept you from reward. Balaam answered Balak, Didn't I indeed tell your messengers whom you sent to me, saying, If Balak were to give me his house full of silver and gold, I could not go beyond the mouth of Adonai, to do good or bad from my own heart? Whatever Adonai may speak, I will speak. Now behold, I am going back to my people. Come, let me counsel you what these people will do to your people in the latter days. Then he uttered his oracle, the oracle of Balaam, son of Beor, the strong man whose eye is opened, the oracle of one hearing God's speech, one experiencing Elyon's knowledge, one seeing Shaddai's vision, one fallen down, yet with open eyes. I see him, yet not at this moment. I behold him, yet not in this location. For a star will come from Jacob, a scepter will arise from Israel. He will crush the foreheads of Moab, and the skulls of all the sons of Seth. Edom will be conquered. His enemies will conquer Seir, but Israel will triumph. One from Jacob will rule and destroy the city's survivors. Then he saw Amalek. So he uttered his oracle and said, Amalek was the first of nations, but will come to ruin at last. Then he saw the Kenite. So he uttered his oracle and said, Your dwelling is secure. Your nest is set in the rock, yet Cain will be destroyed when Asher captures you. Again he uttered his oracle and said, Oh, who can live when God does this? Ships will come from Kittim shore. They will afflict Ashur and Eber, and they too will come to destruction. Then Balaam got up and went and returned to his own place, and Balak went on his way. While Israel was staying in Shittim, the people began to have immoral sexual relations with women from Moab. Then they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods. So the people were eating and bowing down before their gods. When Israel became bound to Baal of Peor, the anger of Adonai grew hot against Israel. Adonai said to Moses, Seize all the ringleaders and hang them before Adonai facing the sun, so that Adonai's fierce anger may be turned away from Israel. So Moses said to the judges of Israel, Each of you, kill your men who have been joining themselves to Baal of Peor. Then behold, a man from Bnei Israel came and brought a Midianite woman to his brothers before the eyes of Moses and of the whole assembly of Bnei Israel, while they were weeping at the entrance to the tent of meeting. When Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the Cohen, saw it, he arose from the midst of the assembly, took a spear in his hand, and went after the man of Israel into the tent and pierced them through, both the Israelite man and the woman's belly. Then the plague among Bnei Israel was stopped. However, 24,000 were dead because of the plague. Then Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Phinehas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the Cohen, has turned away my anger from Bnei Israel, because he was very zealous for me among them, so that I did not put an end to Bnei Israel in my zeal. So now say, See, I am making with him a covenant of shalom. It will be for him and his descendants after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was zealous for his God and atoned for Bnei Israel. The name of the Israelite man killed with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, a prince of a Simeonite ancestral household. The name of the executed Midianite woman was Cosbi, daughter of Zur. He was the tribal head of an ancestral house in Midian. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Deal with the Midianites as enemies, and strike them, for they have been enemies to you in their deceptions of you in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of a Midianite prince, their sister, who was slain on the day of the plague on account of the Peor incident.